All right, so we talked a little bit about how output works with printing in Python. Just going to go over a little bit, just kind of like the basics of how input works in Python. Now, the first thing you need to do is actually create a variable before you can do any kind of inputs. And the reason why is because take say on Google, if you're on Google Chrome, um, I'm sorry, just on the website Google, and you start typing something in, blah 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 blah. I'm just going to type in whatever. Uh, you know, this stuff that I just typed in here has to be saved somewhere on Google. Otherwise, Google can't do anything with it. What's the point of asking a user to, type something in on Google.com in here if Google's not going to be able to use that information, on their server to send stuff back? So, you know, anywhere, anytime you're doing any kind of input into a computer, uh, the computer needs to store that information somewhere, and basically it's in a variable. Sometimes there's different kinds of variables, but in this case we're just using a straight up string variable for this. So I'm just going to initialize something called name, because we're going to store our name in there, and then type in this raw input. Now raw input is actually, this is a Python 2 command. Python 3 just takes regular input, just straight up input. Um, I I've totally mixed this up many times. In fact, I'm looking at our programming 2 chapter right now, and it only says input in there, not raw input. And I'm going to fix that hopefully before you guys watch this video. But in Python 2, you should always use this raw input here. So then just type in enter a name, and I'll do that. And then down here, we're just going to say print. I'm going to say hello, and then name. Alright, so let's just run this real quick. Now down here it says enter a name. I'm going to say Tom, and then you see the hello Tom output at the bottom there. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting. Basically, uh, all we did was we just asked the user for a name with this raw input. We were able to put in a little output with this inside the function here too, which is kind of cool. You wouldn't be able to do this with like C++. There would be like a separate way of doing things. But it's pretty nice that Python has that built in where you can just type in, enter a name, and it outputs it when you're trying to get some sort of input. And basically, the reason why it didn't print out that hello name at the bottom, even though it already ran this first line here, is because the computer, whenever you have a raw input, is basically waiting on a user to input something and then hit enter. It basically, the Python code is just saying, okay, we're being told that we're going to get some information, and obviously we're probably going to be using that information later, so let's not do anything else until we get some sort of action back from the user. So that's why, if I were to run this again, that's why I can just sit here and we get this blinking cursor. It's just waiting for me to put something in. I can put in like Jack, that time, and it just waits until we put something else in. And then I can, obviously, once this variable is stored in the name, I can use it anywhere else, any way I want. Real quick, just to cover it, since this might be a little confusing for you guys, I'm going to go ahead and make a variable. I'm just going to make it x and set this equal to int raw input like this, and then in here I'm going to say enter a number. So the reason why I have an int in front of this, we didn't get necessarily into data types yet, but basically int is a data type, and what it stands for is integer. Now if you don't know, an integer is a whole number, not 5.5, not 6.2, it's only a whole number, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The reason why you have to use int if you're trying to get a number with raw input is because you're trying to specify to the computer. Otherwise, it's basically just going to be ready to store a string otherwise. Let me show you sort of what I mean here. So kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but just bear with me. If I say print, x here, and when we run this code, down here it's going to wait for a number. I'll put in 6, and then there's a 6. If I were to run this here, and let's say instead of putting in 6, I typed in Tom, it's going to give me an error. See this error here? The reason why it's giving me an error is because it's expecting a number with this integer wrapped with the parentheses here. It's expecting a number. Otherwise, it'll just expect a word. Let me show you what I mean for that. So if I were to just put in x again and not have the int part, and then I say raw input, enter a number real quick, and then print x just like this. Now if I run this here, it's going to wait for a number. What if I put in 5? It's going to work, but I can't do anything with this 5. Like I can't say x plus 5 here. Normally this would put out 10 because I put in 5 there. So let's like rerun this. I could put in 5 again like this. It's going to give me an error, and it's because it's treating this x variable, the variable that, or the 5 that we just put into this x variable here, as a string, and it can't, you can't add a word and a number. You just can't do it. So the compiler is treating this as a string and this is a number. It can only add 2 numbers together. So that's why you're going to get an error. And just be aware of data types. We're definitely going to be covering this, I think, in chapter 3 or 4. So not totally important right now, but I just wanted to go over this because I did leave this in the chapter here, and I think it is a little important. All right, so that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next lesson.